Hi guys, it's Matt from Maxon UK here, and in this tutorial we are going to be producing a character wave. Now as you can see on screen, this is done with my favourite little guy in Cinema 4D, the headphone guy. It's what we're going to be using. I have done a previous tutorial on this guy and we're looking at the controllers and all of the things necessary to make him move. If you haven't looked at that yet, I suggest you just pop along and do so. For those of you who have looked at it, then carry on with me and we shall get this guy waving. So it's relatively simple using the movements that we're going to be doing, using his hands, controllers, hips and heads and things like that. But it's just a case of some of the sort of intricacies of character animation that are necessary using what they call the principles of animation. So over the course of a couple of seconds, I'm just going to do a little bit of a wave. So one of the best things to do is really, figure out how long it's going to take to do something. So I'm going to have him sit with his hands at his sides and he's going to move his hands up and he's going to wave and then his hands are going to come back again. And it's going to seem a bit strange, but you may want to record yourself doing it. Reference material is one of the most important things when doing any form of character animation. You'll find that all of the famous animators and animation studios have used some form of reference material, even if it's just to help drawing and animating, anything from Disney when they got a live deer just before they did Bambi, to people who did the facial expressions for, Dory in Finding Nemo, having a mirror sitting in front of you and just recording yourself doing some of the movements and the mouth movements in order to get real lip syncing and really good facial expressions in there. Timing your animation is important, so just, sounds a bit strange, just stand, wave, see how long it's going to take, time yourself and think what it's going to be. So if I was just to sort of like press play on my keyframe and I was to mimic my actions like I've just done, you obviously can't see me, but I can. I know that I can do that in roughly 90 frames. I might just give myself a little bit longer and go for 110 just to ensure that I've got everything that I need to. So to start with, we need to get him into his starting positions. So I'm just going to move the arms down. Okay, I'm going to use both of my screens, all of my screens rather, to just get this into the right sort of positions. Know that I'm happy with the way his character is looking. So I've got him in his starting position, that's fine. Okay, cool. I'm just going to defrown him as well. So using the head controller, there we go. He's got nice bright eyes. Maybe a little bit too much. Maybe I just want to lower it a tad so he's not quite so scared of what it is that he's doing. And we can use maybe a little bit of that to add some facial expressions later on. Cool. So here we go. He's in a relatively simple position. This is absolutely no problem whatsoever. So I'm going to get him waving in that direction. So he's going to lean over to his right. Now, one of the principles of animation is what they call anticipation. And anticipation is anticipating the move that you are going to make. And it's one of those character things that gives realistic movement. And that's the fact that if he's going to wave and move his body that way, the first thing he does is move ever so slightly in the opposite direction. He moves over to his left. So I need to put automatic keyframing on, and this means that it will start to record everything that I do. So very quickly he's going to lean to one side, and you've got to make sure that his other controllers will do what they're supposed to as well. So say after 5 frames I'm going to get his chest controller and it's going to just rock that way a little bit, which means that his right arm will dip down and his left arm will move up a little bit. Okay, you can see it's just a little bit of movement and maybe the arms are a bit too much, but I shall change that as and when I need to. So say by about frame 20, so very quickly, again you can slow stuff down and speed stuff up depending on how you want it to be. His chest controller is going to rotate back over there. It's going to move its way a little bit and his left hand is going to wave. So I'm going to get the hand in the right position, which is going to look a little bit painful for him to start with. And I'm going to move it over there. So you're going to want to use some of your other views to make sure that his hand is, you know, like fully outstretched like that. And how you're going to move his arms. You might need to use his, maybe move it forward. Okay, cool. I've got his spine stuff hidden, but I'm just going to unhide it because I'm going to use that. That's his pole, and that controls where his elbow is. There we go. So his elbow is now back out there, and that's the way his arm's pointing. So you can make it point in all sorts of weird and wonderful directions if you want, but I'm just making sure that his elbow is pointing backwards. And just very quickly, if I just scrub, okay, you can see the position of that right arm. We'll get to that in a minute. So if I just move that over there, we'll work on it a little bit at a time. So his left arm will then rotate a little bit further that way and move out. See, that's only 20 frames. So if I just played that quickly. Yeah, so maybe if I made that 10 frames, maybe a little bit slow. But we can always test it and we can have a look. And then his arm goes out and waves. Again, use your views. Make sure that his arm isn't doing anything too crazy. Cool. So there it's waving. And then I'm going to want it to wave back into the same position. So I'm just going to copy and paste that keyframe. And then I'm going to copy and paste that keyframe. Okay, not too bad, but I don't like that position there, say at 20. Okay, so I'm just going to delete that keyframe. And now you can see his arm goes up, but it does mean that we don't get any sort of movement here. So because I want it to be a really big movement, I'm going to stretch his arm out. And that way we've got a nice arm movement that gives that wave. Okay, that's not too bad for the arm movement there. We have got a lot of way to go before we get some real movement going on with everything else, and that's things like the head. Okay, so if we look at the head controller, at the moment we haven't got a keyframe. So just like the body, as it goes to frame 5, I'm just going to rotate that ever so slightly, and it just gives that little bit more movement. And then as his hand goes up, which doesn't get there until frame 30, I'm going to move his head, but equally I've got that chest controller I'm going to move as well, and I'm going to really bring that over. So we've got this, not, oh, I've done it on frame 29, oops, let's just move that over one. Boop. Now if I press play, you can see that that movement becomes much more realistic. We've got a little bit of movement going on, but his head stays there. So there's a few waves which finish at 60. So say at 45 between the two, I want his head to just go a little bit more, his head and his chest just a little bit further. Okay, so it doesn't stop. And then at frame 60, when his wave finishes, I want it to get to 70, and then I want his arm to go back to where it started. So I'm going to copy and paste that keyframe from 0. Oh, I've got the wrong thing selected. So if I want that controller, okay, just going to make sure that I've got everything selected. So the left arm, okay, oh, I've done it the wrong way around, haven't I? Just going to undo. Sometimes you make mistakes, okay, it happens in 3D. Sometimes you drag and drop the wrong thing and it goes to the wrong place. If I just drag and drop that to 70, there we go, I think I'd overwritten frame 5. Okay, that's not too bad. Now, do you remember when we outstretched it at frame 17? Okay, he's not going to do that time. His hand just comes straight back down. If we want it to, you can outstretch it so that it goes back. There we go. Obviously at frame 70, he's now stuck in his strange position. So I need to get his head and chest controllers. And again, at frame 0, I'm just going to go and drag those back to frame 70 so that he finishes in the same position. There we go. And we've got this real sort of waving and stretching movement that gives him a little bit more realism. His left hand, however, is staying put, if you notice, and it goes up, everything moves except that, and then everything sort of comes back. So I'm going to move that position. So his body goes down even further, doesn't it? We're about frame 40. So I'm just going to make sure that his hand slides down, and then when his body goes back up, okay, which is ready for frame 70, that the hand starting position also goes back up. And there, quite quickly, we've got quite a nice little wave. And his head is real, and his hands move, and everything like that. There are some other waves, that other things that we can do, and that's what they call follow through and overlapping action. So something like that hand, as it moves here, when it gets back, it won't stop dead. So just a couple of frames, I'm going to move his hand a little bit backwards, and then I'm going to copy and paste it so that it's 74. So there's just that little bit of jitter, which gives a little bit more realistic movement. Otherwise everything sort of comes to a dead stop at 70. And I'm going to do the same thing with the head controller. So at 72, his head and chest will just wobble that little bit more one way before they come back to a rest position at 72. So there we go, got a nice little wave, and then his hands come back. Maybe that jitter's too much. Yeah, that jitter's a little bit too much. So I'm going to get the head and chest controller and maybe just expand those out by a few frames so that it's not quite so close together. Little wave, and yeah. Maybe his head doesn't go quite so far. See, it's only going 1 degree. A little bit of a degree, and that's hardly anything at all, but it's enough that it just gives that little bit of movement. Something like that left hand controller as well. You may want to move that sort of stuff. We can add in an extra level of detail, for example, if we want to have a look at how his left hand, like his fingers, so maybe his hand starts more in a fist, so let's get his left hand, let's curl all of his fingers, okay, so he's got a little bit of a fist, and then as it gets to his hand out there, it opens up a little bit more, until it gets to the outstretched part where his hand is big and wide and open. So there you go, it looks like he's really going for your attention now. And again, you know, when his hand gets back to 0, if you want, you can reset those positions to something similar, so a little bit more of a rest position, so his hands aren't completely straight. Sorry, fingers aren't completely straight. Just going to deselect. I'm just going to hide the spine again, just so that we've got those. That's not too bad. Again, it's up to you how you sort of control stuff. So the wave at 40 I like, wave at 50, wave at 60. Maybe at 60 I might just outstretch his arm just that little bit more. Just feels like he wants to stretch out a little bit, doesn't it? Cool. Okay, so it's all of these sorts of things that maybe at 40 for the head and chest. So it starts to come back. Maybe at 36, I'm just going to push it right to the extreme. And then maybe I shall leave it there. So I'm just going to copy and paste that one to 45, overwrite that. There we go. And we've just got some nice little movement for him. And he feels like he's really waving high. Maybe as he starts to lean and he's at his furthest lean, you can move his arm up, you can change where it's going to be. Again, it's all down to you. It's all up to where you want the positions to be. So maybe you want his arm to be further. We started with a base, you know, we've got where the stuff originally was going to be, where the keyframes are going to be useful, and then you can edit it to be more useful, you know, more exaggerated, which is another one of the principles of animation. Maybe that chest controller, I'm just going to adjust where those keyframes are so that they are not there, but maybe when his hand is outstretched. There we go. Okay. Cool. Not too bad. That gives you a little bit of a wave. Maybe I shall add some facial expressions just to make him feel a little bit more alive. So using the head controller, there we go. If I want to just keyframe the blink and the frown so that at 45 he's going to be really wide-eyed, and then at 69, 70 it's going to go back to sort of normal. And it's just enough that it makes it feel like he's after you, that he's, you know, he's seen something he wants to say to you. And we've got all those sorts of sort of little movements. We can do some other stuff as well. Maybe you want to add some hip movements in there. So we've got the hip controller. And then at the very highest swing, 45, maybe if we rotate that just a tad. So we've got that movement, and maybe, okay, we'll just need to return that back to normal at 70 with that one. But I don't want it to go off completely, not until his arm really stretches out and his body goes. So about 30 for me, and then I want it to come back down at 70 along with everything else, maybe just a bit before, so his hips are back. Okay, how are we doing? Okay, his hips don't move fast enough. You can see he's just doing a little bum wiggle. There we go. That now times in with that wave quite nicely. You could even, if you wanted, do something with that left foot to give a real sense of, you know, movement. I'm just going to keyframe all of those. And then when it reaches 40, which is his biggest sort of output, if I just lifted that leg off just a little bit so he's on tiptoes, it gives that sense of movement again. And then at 70, rocks that back down. So again, there we go. We've got movement going on all the way through. We've got his head movement, we've got his eyes, we've got his hands, we've got his fingers. The only thing that feels a little bit dead in the water is his left hand. So his right hand. So let's have a look at that. So at 40 it goes down. So but what I might just do, just to give it a little bit of life, is just keyframe his fingers so that as it gets to say 40, they just curl a little bit more. And then as it gets to say 70 again, they just soften. And press play. Maybe the right arm does feel a little bit flat, doesn't it? So I think perhaps we might need to curl it round, move it closer to the body at 40. And that way it sort of comes back. Here we go. Okay, so I've got my little waving character here. He's desperate for your attention. It gives you a little bit of an idea of what you can do. Maybe I've got that main controller as well. Maybe that will give me a little bit more kick. So again, keyframe, say 45. Let's just rotate him out. There we go. That's going to give a lovely little bit of movement. But I don't want that to kick in until he starts to lean, so I'm going to make sure that that starting keyframe is much lower, and then that it's going to be back down by 70, dragging and dropping. There we go. Lovely. So I'm just going to hide the controllers as well. Ooh, not the whole thing. Oops. Let's just hide the controllers. Actually, I'll do that. There we go. So no controllers visible, and we've got our little dude, our little headphone guy, who's just desperate for your attention now, wanting to make sure that he can see you. Okay, so I hope that was a useful tutorial for you and a nice little introduction to a little bit more character animation. And if I do any more, I shall let you know, and I will catch you next time.